In the height of summer of 1978, on July 14th in Aberdeen, Scotland, the body of 32-year-old scientist Brenda Page was found in her home. Bloodied and beaten, it was evident that Brenda's death was no accident. The Aberdeen Police Department quickly began their work in trying to find her killer. Little did anyone know that it would take 45 years for her murder to be solved. It was DNA testing, the very thing that Brenda researched in her work, that brought her killer to justice. Whose DNA did they find at the scene of the crime? What exactly happened to Brenda Page that took over 4 decades to solve? Welcome back to Cold Case Files, where we cover notorious cold cases from history. Today we'll dive into the tragic case of Brenda Page, a 45-year-old cold case that was finally solved in 2023. But first, if you are new to the channel or have not yet subscribed, please consider clicking the subscribe button as it helps us and motivates us to create more content for you. So without further ado, let's dive right into this mystery. Aberdeen, Scotland is a city rich in history. Its stunning architecture and natural landscapes make it a popular destination for tourists from all over the world. Known as the Granite City, Aberdeen offers a great variety of attractions and activities for visitors and residents alike. A vast choice of restaurants, shops, bars, and music venues make Aberdeen a city of leisure. Just outside the bustling city, Aberdeen also has mountainous ranges and beaches which are popular for skiing, snowboarding, and water sports. No matter the kind of activities you are into, Aberdeen has it all. On top of its fun atmosphere, Aberdeen is home to many top-tier schools and universities. The University of Aberdeen Medical School is the top choice for aspiring medical students looking to achieve a career in helping others. The victim of this story, Brenda Page, worked at this school in hopes of helping those in need. Brenda Page was born in Ipswich, England in 1946. She had a loving relationship with her older sister Rita, who she always looked up to. Rita, along with other friends and family, described Brenda as being very loving, caring, and extremely intelligent. It was no surprise to them that Brenda would quickly excel in the world of science. Despite a 10-year age difference, Brenda greatly admired her older sister. Their bond was unbreakable, Rita often playing a motherly role in her young sister's life. Rita's motherly and protective nature over her little sibling showed the true sisterly love between them. While Rita was 10 years her senior, it was she who looked up to her little sister. Not only was Brenda incredibly intelligent, but she had a kind heart. She loved taking care of animals and owned and loved many pets throughout her life. Her kindness towards people and animals showed the true nature of her compassionate soul. Brenda also had an immense passion for learning. She never seemed satisfied with her vast knowledge and was always striving to learn more. Her love for animals and passion for science led Brenda to seek a degree in zoology at University College, London. Graduating with first-class honors, Brenda happily and easily continued her education in pursuit of receiving her Ph.D. With flying colors, she achieved a Ph.D. in genetics from the University of Glasgow. Brenda maintained her workaholic lifestyle and passion for learning throughout her career as a scientist. It was in 1970 when Brenda met her future husband at the University of Glasgow, Christopher Harrison. As a fellow student and skilled scientist himself, the two seemed a perfect match. On May 6th of 1972, they were married in Brenda's hometown of Ipswich. Together, the two scientists began work at the University of Aberdeen Medical School. To no surprise of anyone who knew her, Brenda's career quickly took off, and she became a genetic researcher and principal of the genetics department at the university. In 1976, after only 4 years of marriage, Brenda and Christopher began filing for divorce. It came to light that Harrison had been physically abusive to Brenda throughout the entirety of their marriage. Brenda's older sister Rita said her sister described her relationship with Harrison as like walking on eggshells. Rita stated that Harrison was completely unpredictable in that he could either be very nice or very nasty. These are often traits of an abuser. Abusers tend to reel in their victims by showing a kind personality, only to lift the mask and show their true nature. They can keep their victims hooked by inconsistently showing their nice side. After 4 short years of marriage, Brenda had had enough of the abuse and filed for divorce. Harrison had been accused of assaulting Brenda on various occasions and in various locations between 1972 and 1976. He was also accused of breach of the peace by threatening violence to her and placing her in a state of fear and alarm for her safety, including at the genetics department at the University of Aberdeen Medical School. Following their messy divorce, Brenda confided in her elder sister. She stated that she thought Harrison was stalking her, which prompted her to get a court order to keep him away from her. It is alleged that between 1976 and 1978, he also committed a breach of the peace by threatening to kill her and keep track of her movements. The divorce was finalized in October of 1977, less than a year before her tragic death would occur. In the aftermath of the divorce, Brenda moved into her own flat, located on Allen Street in Aberdeen, Scotland, with her 3 cats. She lived alone for the remainder of her life, which was tragically cut short at the hands of a monster. On the summer day of July 14, 1978, Brenda's neighbor, Elizabeth Gordon, walked over to Brenda's flat. Elizabeth, age 68 at the time, had heard strange noises coming from the apartment the night before. When she hadn't seen Brenda the entire day, she decided to pay a visit to check on her. Elizabeth was not incredibly close with Brenda, but Brenda always made sure to say hello and make conversation with her in passing. Elizabeth noticed Brenda's kindness from day one and cherished their casual conversation. Brenda always made sure to check in on her elderly neighbor. On that July day, Elizabeth took notice of Brenda's absence and felt it was her turn to make sure her neighbor was okay. Making her way to Brenda's flat, she knocked on the door and received no answer. Reaching for the doorknob, Elizabeth was surprised to find that the door was unlocked. With her nerves rising, she made the decision to make her way into the apartment. At first, Elizabeth did not notice anything out of the ordinary. She called for Brenda and got no response. This prompted her to walk further into the apartment. As she reached Brenda's bedroom, a feeling of dread washed over her senses. As she entered the bedroom, absolute horror struck her to her very core. It was an image that she would never forget. Lying in a pool of blood, Elizabeth found Brenda's body on her bed. Her face was beaten so badly that it was hardly recognizable. Elizabeth immediately ran to phone the police. When they arrived, she explained the horror that she had just seen. She told the police through a flood of tears, "I saw nothing but blood and hair." Eric Grant was one of the first police officers called to the scene upon report of the death. As he walked into Brenda's bedroom and reviewed the scene, it was immediately apparent that a murder had taken place. The scene was like nothing he had seen before. Grant knew that a full forensic team would be needed due to the horrific nature of the crime. Brenda was lying face up on her bed, still dressed in her nightdress. She was completely covered in blood. Grant could tell that the lifeless body had received multiple blows to the head, as it was beaten so violently that he could barely make out her features. Soon after, another police officer and forensic scientist arrived on the scene, Eric Jensen. He noted that Brenda was lying across her bed with her feet on the floor and her hands up towards her neck. It appeared that she attempted to fight for her life, but lost the battle. Based on her position, she had been struck while either lying down or sitting at the edge of the bed. Still in her nightdress, Brenda was likely preparing for bed before being brutally attacked. Jensen immediately began his analysis and collected any evidence that could be found in the apartment. Upon his walkthrough, Officer Jensen found blood on the bedroom door handle and on the front door of the apartment. The blood was consistent with Brenda's brutal death, indicating that the killer made his way through the apartment covered in her blood. Pushing through the bedroom door and out the apartment door, the killer left a trail of Brenda's blood behind. Jensen also walked to the rear side of the apartment to search for signs of a break-in. At the back of the flat, he found a window that showed signs of being tampered with. Further inspection showed that the window appeared to have been forced open. From his examination, he concluded that a lever of some sort with a chiseled tip was used to pry the window open, likely a crowbar or a similar tool. The detectives theorized that the killer had broken in through the back window and hidden Brenda's large wardrobe, waiting until she got home. Signs of assault were visible as well, with stains visible on Brenda's duvet cover that contained traces of foreign DNA. The cause of death in the initial autopsy was deemed violent assault. All of these indicators told detectives that this was not a random attack or a robbery gone wrong. Someone had deliberately targeted Brenda, and her murder was meticulously planned. During their investigation, detectives questioned multiple friends and family of Brenda to get any insights on who might want to harm her in any way and would be capable of committing such a horrible act. Immediately, fingers were pointed at Brenda's ex-husband, Christopher Harrison. Not one of Brenda's inner circle had anything good to say about Harrison. It had been apparent that Brenda was being abused by Harrison throughout their marriage. Elsa Christie, a close friend of Brenda's, told police that she had spoken to Brenda over the phone only a few days before the murder. She stated that Brenda was afraid for her safety and thought her ex-husband was going to hurt her. She really seemed quite terrified of him, she said to the detectives. Another friend, Diane Davies, stated to the police that Brenda was going to get a court order to legally keep Harrison away from her. Per Davie, Harrison had recently attacked Brenda. He had thrown hot tea over Brenda during an argument, which left her with burns. Police also confirmed that Brenda had been hospitalized more than once due to Harrison's violence towards her. With all of the testimonies from friends and family, Harrison was arrested on suspicion of murder. Interrogated diligently by detectives, Harrison professed his innocence and maintained the fact that Brenda was the best thing in his life, even after the divorce. He did not give in to the pressure of the interrogation. When asked if he had ever been in Brenda's apartment, he denied ever stepping inside the home. To the dismay of the detectives, Harrison could not be convicted due to lack of evidence. Although he seemed a prime suspect, they did not have enough proof for a conviction at the time. Detectives Grant and Jensen began looking for alternate suspects in hopes that their dead end would be reopened to more possible avenues to explore. Through further interviews with family members, detectives learned that Brenda was having money problems and had taken up a second job as an escort. While in modern society an escort is seen as a sex worker, this was not the case in 1978. Rather, escorts of that time were only hired to meet up with men and accompany them in social settings, or meet with them publicly for dinner and conversation. Brenda enjoyed this second job, as it paid well, and she loved meeting new people. Brenda's escort services did not involve sleeping with her clients in any way. Police explored this avenue further, wondering if Brenda was hired by someone who may have had bad intentions. Days, weeks, and months went by, and detectives were unable to get anywhere with this lead. Two key pieces of evidence remained in police custody for decades, in hopes that one day they could be re-examined with advanced technology. One of those was the DNA sample found on Brenda's duvet cover. The other was samples of the chipped paint from her back window, the very one that the culprit forced open to enter her home. While investigators found what looked like dried paint inside of Harrison's vehicle, there was no way at the time to prove it was a match to Brenda's window. At the time of the murder, DNA testing was not used during investigations. Luckily, the investigators had the right mind to preserve these small pieces of evidence. DNA samples, paint chips from the window that was tampered with, and blood samples were locked away in evidence for almost 40 years before the case was finally reopened. It was in 2015 when detectives decided to reopen the case for further investigation. On hearing this news, Brenda's sister, Rita Ling, gave a public statement pleading with the people of Aberdeen to provide any information they could. She and the rest of their family had already suffered for decades, with no closure in sight. Some of their family had passed away in the time since the murder, never knowing who had taken their beloved Brenda from them, and never getting the answers they so desperately needed. Thousands of tips flooded in, but none were substantial enough to prosecute any suspects. Brenda's murder became one of the longest-running cold cases in Scotland's history. In 2020, a breakthrough in the case finally occurred. With advancements in technology, it became possible for the DNA evidence to be tested and compared to the detectives' list of suspects. Genetic testing, the very thing that Brenda had been researching in her career, provided investigators with a DNA match to the DNA samples found on Brenda's duvet cover. Being that Brenda was a genetic scientist herself, it was fitting that DNA testing is what helped to solve her murder. In her lab, Brenda researched how DNA can be compared between individuals and how genetics plays a role in one's DNA. Investigators were able to find a DNA match to the sample found at the crime scene, showing that it was 590 million times more likely to belong to one person than any other man. This DNA match, paired with witness statements and other clues, provided investigators with enough evidence to officially make an arrest. It was, in fact, Brenda's very own ex-husband whose DNA was found at the scene. Christopher Harrison was charged and arrested for the murder in March of 2020 by Detective Constable Thomas Gorman. The DNA match was the missing piece of the puzzle needed to finally charge Harrison with murder. Harrison could not be charged through speculation alone, based on statements by Brenda's friends and family about their relationship. In addition to the DNA evidence, a paint chip was found on the window of his vehicle during the investigation of the murder. The evidence remained locked up until it could be further tested with modern technology and compared to the crime scene. Testing showed that it was a match to the paint on Brenda's window that had been pried open with a crowbar. Harrison was further accused of attempting to defeat the ends of justice by disposing of a watch, a bag, and contents including a pair of shoes, with the intent to destroy forensic evidence and to avoid detection and prosecution. Prosecutor Alex Prentice, a leading advocate deputy and Crown Counsel, presented compelling evidence to disprove Harrison's false alibis which he has stood by since 1978.
Point of entry within 13 Allen Street. A number of paint flecks were recovered.
Flecks of paint.
Paint flecks within the point of entry at 13 Allen Street. Examination of these flecks revealed that one of these paint flecks was found to be similar in composition and colour to the control sample taken from your motor car, the green coloured Mini Traveller LVA 426E that you drove in 1978. Explain that to me. So a number of paint flecks were recovered from under the point of entry within the address, okay? And then
the police took my car, and whether the police have scratched my car and left paint residue in Allen Street, I really wouldn't know. But after this interview, I wouldn't put anything past them. I really wouldn't.
So that's your reasoning for that then?
I think it's so ridiculous as to be completely nonsensical. Where would the paint flecks come from?
Your car.
Your car.
Where?
Well, you've said yourself, you've described your car as a dustbin that's fallen to bits.
Yes, but where would the paint have come from on my car?
It's been taken from your car, and it's much
exactly.
the
It's been taken
paint
from
fleck
my
that's
car.
inside
By whom? By the police?
The address where she was found brutally murdered. Under the point of entry.
Brenda Page.
The window that you'd been climbing in and out of, probably for about 2 years.
Brenda, what absolute nonsense. Brenda.
Did you have sex at 13 Allen Street?
No, I didn't.
You sure?
Absolutely certain.
Why are you absolutely certain?
I'm divorced at this stage. We're leading our separate lives.
Okay, so no physical contact at all?
No.
When was the last time you had? Can you remember the last time you had sex with Brenda?
No.
You're getting a bit annoyed about that. Is that fair to say?
It's getting fairly personal, isn't it? And I can't answer the things that you're asking me. You're asking me questions about a period when I'm a divorced man. It really doesn't make any sense.
Over the last 4 decades, Harrison has proclaimed his innocence, stating that he would never harm Brenda or know anyone who would want to harm her. He argued that the world lost a brilliant scientist by no hand of his own. The DNA evidence proved otherwise. It was established that the duvet stain contained traces of his DNA. With genetic testing that was not available at the time of the murder, forensic scientist Andrew Gibb said it was 590 million times more likely that the duvet sperm sample came from Harrison than any other male. It was believed Harrison had forced open a window at the rear end of the apartment and may have lain in wait for Brenda's return. After committing the late-night murder, he walked out through the front door and disposed of his blood-stained clothes, watch, and other evidence. The cause of death in the initial autopsy was violent assault. In the 1970s, autopsies were not performed as thoroughly as they are in today's society. Today, violent assault could mean an infinite number of things and would not be a valid cause of death. For this reason, a forensic pathologist named Marjorie Turner was assigned to the case after it was reopened. She was to re-examine the original autopsy notes and make an accurate and more detailed analysis in alliance with how modern autopsy reports are written. Turner was able to describe the death in graphic detail based on the original autopsy notes and pictures alone. Defensive injuries were found all over Brenda's hands, showing that she had put up a fight as much as she could. Brenda had extensive bruising on her hands as well as a dislocated finger. These are telltale signs that she fought for her life as they were classic defensive wounds. The cause of death was deemed blunt force trauma by Turner. Brenda had been struck more than 20 times. This was indicative of a severe aggression. Turner confirmed that a weapon had most definitely been used for the assault, and possibly more than one. Turner confirmed that Brenda suffered an immensely violent death. With Harrison's track record for violence, Brenda had feared he would one day be the cause of her death. In February of 2023, nearly 3 years after his arrest, Harrison's trial finally began. At 82 years old, he still pleaded not guilty to the murder. Presided over by Judge Lord Richardson, a lengthy court case ensued. The jury was not shown photographs of the injuries, but rather were presented with a 3D computer-generated model. After reviewing the evidence and hearing witness testimonies during the lengthy trial, the jury at Aberdeen's High Court made their decision in March of 2023. By majority, they found Christopher Harrison guilty of the murder of Brenda Page after almost 3 hours of deliberation. Lord Richardson, the judge on the case, handed out a life sentence to Harrison, with a minimum of 20 years in prison. He ended his verdict by saying, "As a result of your senseless act, you have brought the life of Brenda Page to a brutal and premature end." Harrison, now aged 82, will likely die in prison for his crimes. Harrison showed no emotion after the verdict was delivered, and was led away handcuffed to a prison guard. The beautiful life of Brenda was tragically cut short at the hands of her own ex-husband. The accomplished scientist devoted her life's work to researching genetic testing. It was genetic testing that ended up solving her own murder, an accomplishment she would surely be thrilled to learn. A statement by her family was made after the guilty verdict was given. They stated, "We, as a family, are absolutely delighted with the verdict of today's trial. Not a day goes by when we don't think about Brenda and the horrendous ordeal she must have suffered that night. Brenda was an extremely kind, intelligent woman with her whole life ahead of her. It hurts us to think of the great things she would have undoubtedly achieved." 45 years is a long time for her family to deal with Brenda's loss without receiving closure. Every time the case was reopened or reinvestigated, this only reopened old wounds for her loved ones, as they had to relive her tragic loss again and again. Unfortunately, Brenda's mother was not able to live long enough to see her killer brought to justice. She passed 14 years after her daughter's murder, unaware that it would take 45 years for her killer to be caught. But Brenda's sister Rita did live to see Harrison put behind bars. She knew that Harrison had always been guilty, and was delighted to see him answer for his crimes. At least Brenda can rest in peace. Detective Inspector Gary Winter, the lead detective in the reopened case, added, "Brenda was never forgotten, and hope remained that one day her murderer would face the consequences of his actions. For Brenda's family, colleagues, friends, and everyone who has worked on this case over many years, after over 4 decades, justice was finally served." Brenda's family and colleagues have commented on how pertinent and fitting it is that DNA has played a part in solving her murder, given her research work in the 1970s as a genetic scientist. With future advancements in this type of research, Brenda would be elated to know her own research has helped so many others get the justice they deserved. What are your thoughts on this case? We would love to know your thoughts in the comment section below. Do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more thrilling context. Until next time, stay safe, and keep your eyes peeled for the next mystery to unfold.